Hey, I'm McKenna.
And I'm Cass.
And this is Call You in 5.
Comparison. What a fun topic.
A topic that we can probably all relate to.
We can all relate to. And I think especially as we've talked about, like this is a year for the girls, right? Like
Yes.
The girls have Barbie. The girls have the Eras Tour. And now the girls have the
Football.
NFL.
Yeah.
So we need to stop comparing ourselves to one another, and like, because I think what happens when we compare ourselves to one another is we end up feeling like we're in a competition.
Isolated.
Or and when we're competing we feel isolated because we're like, don't feel like this is a team sport anymore.
Right.
It's like every girl for themselves. So I'm curious to hear from you when you find yourself, just like get right into it, when you find yourself comparing yourself to other women or to other people in general, what's the byproduct of that in your life? Like, where do you see that show up?
Yeah, I actually doing social media now more so full time. I am on it way more than I ever have been in my life, which is really fun, but it's also can be a huge downer for comparison. I'm just going to say that. And I oftentimes find myself comparing myself to other social media influencers who are bigger than me, same as me. How many this, how many that are they getting? And it's very negative because it makes me want to stop what I'm doing. Makes me want to just give up, like, oh, well, I can't ever do that, so I'm done, you know? Mm-hmm. Which isn't fun. Like, I enjoy what I'm doing, and so the more that I kind of turn that off and I'm starting to focus on what I'm creating and what I want to create, it becomes more fun. So the comparison game can be very real, and it can be very frustrating and stunting to like any kind of progression that you have in what you're doing. Like you can compare in any aspect of your life. Like it doesn't have to be social media. I'm just very present in social media because that's what I do for work. Mm-hmm. But how about you? Like how do you notice it and what happens?
Yeah, well, just to speak to the social media piece, like even if you don't like consider yourself an influencer, I noticed that like TikTok in particular, all social media, but TikTok in particular is such a negative platform. Like I feel like the things that go viral on TikTok, unless it's Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, God bless them, it's like negative. It's like people venting, which is like, it's fine to vent, but it's like often putting other people down.
Or people attacking each other in the comments.
Yeah, or like duetting something and disagreeing. And I think it's fine to have differences of opinion, but I think we've taken it a step farther from like disagreeing with one another to almost like demonizing one another, where it's like you are bad if you think this way versus like I think differently than you. And which isn't so much what we're talking about with comparison, but I do think our minds can go there even if we don't shoot back a mean comment. Our minds can go there either about that other person from a place of self-preservation or about ourselves, or like I should have thought to do that or create that kind of content, or outside of social media. Like I think a way that I find myself, or like things that come up for me when I notice myself comparing myself to others, is I start to feel dramatically discontent with my life when I'm comparing myself to others. I suddenly don't like my wardrobe. I can't find anything that fits or feels good.
Relatable.
I don't feel as strong as the girl next to me on the Pilates reformer. I am like really critical about how hard I work, what I look like, if I work as hard as people who maybe like have the things I want, which I think comparison and jealousy are probably like pretty tightly correlated. Yeah. But I think overall, the biggest byproduct for me is just like a general sense of discontentment, like not liking what I have, or sometimes like who I am very much.
Yeah, I think that that's very relatable for everybody, and I would assume that most of you listening can relate to some of that.
Yeah.
So today's episode, we kind of wanted to just talk about how we can stop that and change our mindset. Because, okay, here's the thing. The more you think something, or the more you use those neurons, that pathway in your brain, the more your mind is instantly going to go there. So we want to change that, and we want to come up with ways that we can stop the comparison game and be happy and content and proud of who we are. So
the neurological piece is so true, because the more you think something, it literally is building a pathway in your brain, which means that as a result of today's episode, we need to help you build new pathways in your brain. No small fee. We are retraining the brain today.
Yes, exactly.
And I think, just like kick us off, I think like a lot of that comes down to what you are inputting in your mind of who you should be or things that you should do, right? Like
should is the key word there.
Right. And I think to continue on our like lane of social media, I think who you follow makes a big difference in how content you feel with who you are, right? And maybe there's people like close in your life that you really care about who you find yourself comparing yourself to. I think that's good to check. Doesn't mean you have to unfollow them. But some of those like aspirational lifestyles that don't like inspire you to be a better version of yourself, but make you feel like you have to change who you are to be someone else, I think it's good sometimes just to go through and be like, how does following some of these people make me feel? Does it?
And here's a key thing too. Nowadays you don't have to unfollow somebody, you can mute them. So even if you are like close with them and it would be offensive if you unfollowed them, like if they're family or something like that, if the content that they're posting or is making you feel a way that you don't like or you're not proud of, you can mute them.
Yeah.
So
that's a good tip.
And they'll never know.
Yeah, that's really good. What else do you think?
Oh yeah, I think first off, it's super important to be self-aware that you're doing it. Because if you're not self-aware, you can't retrain the pathways in your brain, right? Like you have to be aware of when you're doing it and what you're doing and what you're saying. And that is probably the number one step. And then unfollowing, removing anything from your life that is negative or causing those feelings. So whether it be muting people, unfollowing people, if you have friends in your life that are kind of more negative, or maybe they are comparing and you just don't really like, I don't know, if they're just negativity, right?
Yeah.
And it's just not bringing positivity to who you are or what you're doing or what you're passionate about or whatever it may be, you can also start to distance yourself. Nothing has to be like a hard break, like blow up, burn a bridge down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's super good, because I think sometimes like there are things for me that I don't realize that I'm comparing myself to until I'm like triggered, right? I see something on social media that makes me think I should buy a different like pair of shoes, or like makes me feel like I need to look a different way. And so I think like self-awareness and like inputs like really go hand in hand, because sometimes it's like you need to get to the root of whatever that thing is in your heart or mind that makes you feel insecure or insufficient, so that you can know what is triggering you to like feel that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that they're really connected.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then a way that we can reroute all of those.
Yeah.
You know, like we said a few things, but I think acknowledging your achievements or like what you're good at is gonna change your mental space and the way you view yourself. And it's also going to show you that everybody has different strengths. So your strengths are going to be different than somebody else, and it doesn't make you any better or any less. But just maybe hype yourself up a little bit, and that can also help.
That's so good, because I think sometimes what we do when we see something someone else is doing who's either in our lane or like in a parallel lane to us that we either want to be like or want to be better than, is when we get, I think it's so good to get super confident and super like dialed into like who you are, what matters to you, what you're good at, and recognize that that does not take away from someone else that's in your lane. Like, I think it's also good in the same breath to like acknowledge what you're really good at, is to actually acknowledge people that you're comparing yourself to, what they're good at, and say like, man, like that person is so good at those things, instead of tearing them down.
Yeah.
Because I think we're more prone to tear ourselves down when we are like super comfortable speaking poorly, specifically about other women. And so I think gossip, if it's about people you know or people you don't know, is not helping your relationship with competition, comparison, or like really authentic confidence if you are really comfortable tearing other people down.
Yeah. And I mean, it probably feels really good too to just be like, wow, good for her. That is really awesome. Like, I'm proud of her. She deserves that. Like, That's totally flipping the script and changing some pathways for sure.
Because I also think it can like relieve a lot of pressure to recognize that I'm really good at these things and I also can grow in these areas. But how cool that she is really good at those areas that I'm growing. I can learn from her. I can like build a relationship with her. I also think it can relieve some pressure too when you recognize what you're really good at and what you're not so good at. If you're interested in like building a team or bringing other people alongside you, finding people that are good at things different than you. Like, I think you and I are really good about this, right? Like, you're really good at TikTok and YouTube, and I'm really good at, like, a podcasting platform and Instagram.
Yeah.
And then we, like, run in our own lanes, not saying, like, man, like, I wish I was better at TikTok like McKenna. It's like, no, go McKenna. Like, McKenna is so good at TikTok that I learned from her. Like, literally, everything I know about TikTok, I feel like I've learned from you. And, like, in the same way, it's like, I can be really confident that, like,
You're good at speaking, for one.
Yeah.
You're, like, really good at... And kind of just, like me, I have to have everything written down that I want to say.
Yeah.
You're good at, like, you know what you want to say, and you're good at, like, planning it. You know?
Great example, right? And also, I think we're not modeling this very well, but I think, like, getting comfortable taking compliments is, like, another one.
Yeah.
I'm so bad. And I think, like, this is, like, hopefully helpful that, like, we are learning right alongside you. But, like, thank you for saying that. Like, that means a lot because it's really affirming of skills that I feel, like, really proud of. Like, I'm really proud to be able to, like, feel called to communication and those things in my life, you know? But I also think when we're able to build up one another, we can stand more confidently in our own skill sets. And I think it's one thing to like commit to cutting gossip down in your own life. It's another thing to challenge people who mean a lot to you and who you are like running in the same circles with to also quit comparing themselves to others or quit gossiping about other women too, right?
Yeah, I also think it's important to add on to that when you have people running in the same lane as you say this, they're doing the same thing that you're doing for work and maybe they're a little bit ahead of you or a lot ahead of you. Instead of being jealous of that or envious of that or talking negatively of that, you could say they have that. That just means that I can too, right? Like it's just showing you what can happen if you're dedicated enough and want something bad enough.
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to add on to that is daily gratitude can also cut the comparison game because if you're thankful for the things that you do have, you're not going to be wishing that you had what the person next to you has.
Yeah, I think gratitude is the biggest antidote to competition because when we are like fulfilled and satisfied with the things that we have, we don't need to strive for more. But when we do grow as individuals or our platforms or our spheres of influence or our like revenue, whatever growth happens, that like only generates us more gratitude. Sometimes I think when we already have a scarcity mindset around things, when we get more, we just want more versus like gratitude, I think really actually helps us get to where we want to go because it's so much more fueling than discontentment or scarcity. So that's really good.
And you're living more in the moment.
And I think when you live that way, you are actually like a model to follow for other people in your life, right? Like talking about some of those relationships that like competition or comparison can run rampant. When you say like, hey, I actually don't like it when you talk about our friend in a way that puts her down or some influencer that we both follow, when you actually live that and you also don't put yourself down, you also aren't like self-deprecating or like mean or cutting down to other people, and your life and your brain pathways are changing, you feel more grateful, and that can really inspire other people around you, which is a gift not just to you, but to the people that you do life with.
And then on top of you talking about scarcity mindset, I think it's important to note that there is more than enough to go around, even if you're in a very what was the word I was just saying? If you're in a very saturated market or whatever you're doing, there's still plenty to go around. It's a saturated market for a reason. And there's more than enough. So the moment you kind of leave that scarcity mindset and know that even though the person next to me has what I want, that means I can have it too. There's plenty to go around. It changes your attitude on a lot of things.
Yeah. So I think like as we wrap up, one thing I want to say is like, why do you think you compare yourself to others? Like, why do we think? I think the biggest reason we compare ourselves to others is because we are like absorbing this pressure to like perform, show up perfect, and win approval. And I think when we do that, we try to like assimilate ourselves with other people. We try to be like other people instead of, like we talked about last week, like being really in tune with like who we are, what we're passionate about, and like how we can live in that space. And so I just want to encourage you that like, just because we live in a world and a society that's like obsessed with perfection and performance and approval, you don't need to live into that. You can choose another route. And I feel like that there's a lot of freedom and like peace that comes with that.
I totally agree with everything that you said. So I was going to answer that question too, exactly like you did. So I think you said what I had to say.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening to Call You in 5, and we'll call you next week.
Follow us on all social media platforms. See ya.